Okay, welcome everyone. Let's get started whilst we're still collecting people. My name's Joss Colchester, and along with my co-host Manali, we're going to be leading you through today's workshop. We're both with the SI London Hub, and I'm going to be facilitating the first section of this workshop today. You can see it here. Hopefully Manali will share with you the mirror board link. We're going to be working a lot in here today. It is a 1-hour workshop where we're learning about this ecosystems thinking canvas that you'll find on our website. We'll share with you towards the end the link so that you can download that on the website. It's Creative Commons, it's freely available. You can reuse it as you wish. Today we're going to learn about how to use this guide. We'll learn a little bit some of the ideas behind it so that we understand what's going on and how to use it. So yeah, it'll be 1 hour, and we're going to jump right in. If you have any questions, post them in the chat. Manali will be happy to pick them up and we can answer them as we go along. Today's session is being recorded. We'll put it on our YouTube channel for those who can't make it. Okay, so here we are, this idea of ecosystem thinking. Very foundational to systems thinking, trying to see the broader system we're a part of. This canvas, the canvas we'll be looking at today, is designed as a template for running a workshop or a lab session to help members shift their thinking from ecosystem to ecosystem thinking. The aim is for us to try and reveal participants' underlying paradigm and mental models that form a self-centered view of the world. This can then form the basis for exploring how they may see through different perspectives to become more aware of the system as a whole, independent of their place in it. The aim is to extend our level of thinking and awareness beyond the parts to the whole systems level. As we'll talk about, this is really key to any sort of systems change, systems innovation. Of course, this is part of our series on the systems innovation canvases and tools for you to learn about how to use those tools and methods. This is the second or third in that series. And this is going to be a key one where you're kind of maybe at the start of that process, where you're helping people to start to think holistically about the system that they're involved in, the system they're trying to change. Okay, so that's that. I'm just going to say a few words about this idea of ecosystem thinking. Maybe you're familiar with it already, but just a little bit of context. We actually covered it in the first of our guides when we talked about systems awareness. And this is Otto Scharmer. Maybe you've heard of Otto Scharmer. He's a quite well-known contemporary systems thinker. And he says, you can't change a system unless you transform consciousness. So that's kind of what we're getting at here. The idea that really our thinking shapes kind of how we look at the world, and then how we go about acting in that world, how we go about designing, managing, and trying to change systems. And if we really want a kind of a systems level change instead of a change in parts, it's going to come from a slightly different kind of awareness, this ecosystem awareness, instead of a lot of the kind of more ego-centered kind of perspective we come from, which results in more of kind of change in parts. So here we are. Systems thinking is about trying to improve the quality of our thinking, so as to not just see the parts, but instead to see the systems we form part of in our world. For most adults, seeing systems does not come naturally to us. In our everyday way of being, we see parts and draw a few connections that are very much centered around us and our particular place in the world. To see systems is to in some way overcome this self-centered view of the world. And from that can come a kind of systems innovation or a systems change. This requires us to overcome some of the limitations, flaws, and biases in our thinking resulting from an egocentric egoism, so as to see the system we form part of independent from ourselves and our kind of needs and wants in that system. Calling oneself a systems thinker should be a commitment to an ongoing learning process of examining and trying to improve our thinking, to become better at seeing systems. This starts with first understanding how we see the world and the existing limitations of our view of the world. So it's a lot about reflexive thinking, being aware of how we're looking at the world. This is the famous quote, we've met the enemy and he or she is us. And that says a lot about wicked problems. They're actually kind of created by us and our way of looking at the world. So it starts with the recognition that our thinking and worldview determines how we act, which leads to the world we create around us. If you want paradigm shifting breakthroughs, it will happen by changing our way of thinking. And this will only happen by investing the time and energy in understanding our way of thinking and current limitations. So that's the idea of reflexive thinking. We're not going to magically kind of shift to a different level of awareness. We're not magically going to overcome a kind of more self-centered view of the world. This is going to come through kind of being reflexive about our way of looking at the world and unpacking that and kind of exploring it and asking how we might improve and develop it over time. Okay, so this is another quote from Marta Sharma, actually. He says, I believe the most interesting challenges we face involve seeing and acting from the whole, and that requires us throughout larger systems to wake up to another level of awareness that we collectively begin to operate from. So that's really the key idea here. To really make these important changes, to really tackle wicked problems in a systemic way, we're going to have to, as you say, wake up to a different level of awareness, and that's what we're talking about here, and that's what this canvas is here to help us and participants in a workshop do. So this is it, quite simple in essence. It's thinking about ecosystem thinking, and then we have this thing called ecosystem thinking. So what is ecosystem thinking? Let's take a look at that. So Otto Sharma describes it. He describes it, what's really needed is a deeper shift in consciousness so that we begin to care and act, not just for ourselves and other stakeholders, but in the interests of the entire ecosystem in which economic activity takes place. In this respect, it is critical that as systems innovators, we become aware of our ego and the change process. As Mr. Sharma notes, acting from an egocentric level of awareness creates a set of motives that will lead us down the wrong path in our initiative. Real sustainable systems change can only be realized and maintained through an awareness of and acting in the interest of the whole system we wish to change, unless we address the fundamental structures of our thinking and motives and shift this to an ecosystem level. The same people will create the same problems, just in new structures. I don't know if you've heard that famous quote from Zen and the Art of Motorcycle diary, where he talks about if a factory is torn down, but the same logic that created it exists, then we'll just go and create that factory again, because it's actually the underlying logic. That's what Mr. Sharma's getting at here. Want something different, really fundamentally different, we're going to have it's going to be based on a different logic, and that's what we're getting at here. We're looking for this kind of a logic, right? We're saying a lot. What he's saying, you dig into his writing there and talking, he's saying a lot of the world we've created is actually created like this. It's kind of an egocentric, a lot of our economic systems and finance and our relationships to the environment, we'll be unpacking that now in a minute. He's saying a lot of that's created from this kind of awareness, and what we really need is this kind of awareness, us as part of a broader ecosystem. So this is about seeing the whole. It's the primary ability of a systems leader is the capacity to see the larger systems and act according to that context. In any complex setting, people typically focus their attention on the parts of the system most visible from their vantage point. In previous sections, we looked at that elephant illustration with different people pulling on the elephant, and they're just seeing their part of the system. We're going to change the system. We're going to have to come to some understanding of it, not just our part in it. This usually results in arguments about who has the right position on the problem. It is via the synthesis of different perspectives that we can hope to overcome this and realize systems awareness. Helping people to see the larger system is essential to building shared understanding of complex issues and the job of a systems leader. This is about being better able to listen, see, and act within the context of the broader environment the system forms part of. So that's a little bit about ecosystem thinking. And this is essentially the canvas itself is very simple. It really just looks at those two dimensions, and it's asking people what does the world look like when we look at it from this perspective? And then asking them to think about what does it look like to look at the world from this ecosystem perspective. So quite simple in essence, but it's what's interesting is to do it as we will do now, to try it in different contexts so that we can learn to look at the worlds in different contexts, in different ways. And that will help us kind of develop this underlining capacity if we try it in different ways. Okay, so the ecosystem thinking, we're asking participants in the workshop, what is ecosystem thinking in the context you find yourself in? And then we're asking, in the system we're dealing with, what does it look like to see oneself as just one part of the overall complex adaptive system, interdependent with others in the overall system? So that's the question. We're going to jump into now the workshop. This is, of course, a workshop. I'm not going to present here for very long. We will jump into that. Any questions, Manali, at this stage, or should we jump in? Manali, any questions? Okay, let me check, Jump.
We don't have any questions right now.
Okay. So here we are. This is the canvas we're going to be working on. The first one here we're going to think about is finance. So hopefully you all have the link at this stage. You're able to join me here. I'm going to ask you to post up. Firstly, as shown before, we're going to think about what does this system look like when we look at it from an ecosystem thinking perspective. Think about finance here from a self-centered perspective. It's good to start with this and then move on to the ecosystem one. So let's grab a sticky. You have them here in the blue on the left, and it's very simple. You just type in what you believe this system would look like from that perspective. Some aspects of that system from that perspective. We'll take a couple of minutes to do that. Okay, let's take a look at what you've come up with here. Hopefully we can explore what it looks like from an ecosystem perspective in the context of finance. So I don't have enough money to buy what I need. Yeah, what do we think this is saying? What's kind of underneath this perspective of the world? Anybody want to unmute themselves? How is this person relating to that system? I think that's part of this. Anybody want to talk about that? This one here is closely related to own investments. So I think what this is saying is it's about needs, isn't it? It's about my needs in relation to this system. I don't have enough money to buy what I want. I need things, and this system kind of exists in relation to me based upon what I need, and that's what I see in the system. I don't even see the system really. I just see, oh, I need this or I need that. And ownership too is another kind of core part of this. We see the system in the context of what do I own, or what can I have, what can I get, what do I control or own, I guess is the best way of putting it. So large volumes of capital misallocated. Banks, digital banks, apps. I need more money to fulfill my needs. Okay, so that's expressing it, what I was saying there. Wealth is the end, not the means to a greater good. Yeah, yeah. It's not really a system that performs a function to a greater good, should we say. It's something that I want to get something from. I don't like bankers. Insurers are conservative, maximize shareholder value. Finance goes only to where direct financial returns are. Maximize profit or cash in hand. Yeah, so it's trying to accumulate things really, rather than kind of serving a function, a greater good. It's more about having things and accumulating things. So maximize shareholder profit, right? Again, accumulating or maximizing things. Profit over ethics, the odds are against me. It's hard to manage finance. So zero-sum game, that's an interesting one. Because this is about relationships. It's about your relationship to the system when you're in this ego-centric view of the world. A zero-sum game. There are winners and there are losers. And other people have put about, okay, if a couple of people, zero-sum games, if you win, I lose. And there's also stuff about inequality here. That's kind of part of it too, isn't it? Zero-sum game again. Profit over ecological systems. So that's about kind of gain and ownership over the broader function or, yeah, broader functioning of this system within its environment. Living for money. Key stakeholders, finances relates to. Give a little, take a little. I will change. Yeah, well, this is an interesting one about kind of gaining and losing. I think is part of it, because you're trying to have things, you're trying to get things in the system. You can hold them, because that's kind of what our ego is to a certain extent. It's about holding and having something, isn't it? Rather than being kind of part of this broader system and functioning effectively within it. This is about gaining things or losing things, a zero-sum game. Some people better, some people worse. Benefit to my company. Yep, living for the money, stocks, scarcity mindset. That's an interesting part of it too. It's like there's only so much to go around, winners and losers. Yeah, so it creates certain like dynamics in the system. It creates a certain way of thinking about this system. There will be winners, there will be losers. I want to be a winner, even if other people are losing. So it's going to create a whole set of dynamics in the system, this kind of mentality. How do we serve, how do you serve me to be more productive? Okay, great. So hopefully that kind of elicited some of the underlying assumptions and mentality and way of kind of relating to the system in this ecosystem paradigm. And we're now going to think about, well, what does it look like? How do we relate to this system in this ecosystem thinking? How do we see the system? How do we operate in it? So let's take a few minutes, jump in there, post up some ideas on that. I think that was quite rich what you put up here. We really started to get an idea of what it looks like in this world. It'd be great to see it from this other perspective also. If you have any questions or if you'd like to discuss anything briefly, you can unmute yourself and ask it out. Wow, you've almost you've filled it all up here. Okay, let's take a little look at what you've come up with. I think this is quite interesting. Complex with many actors, elements, and dynamics. So that this is getting, I think, in a more kind of relational way of looking at the system, or a multiplicity of relationships that you're embedded. Okay, let's look at the little graphic here that you're embedded. Well, even to go back to our graphic up here, you're embedded within a multiplicity of relationships within this system of many kinds, kind of diversity of interactions. And that takes us straight away into the world of complexity, doesn't it? As soon as you start looking at all these interactions, you get to complexity, interacting with many actors, elements, and dynamics. So I'd say that's a key part of it. You're embedded within networks of diverse actors, and you have to be able to embrace complexity to some extent, I'd say, in that worldview. Okay, so some rules of system are hard to change, have developed over time. Okay, long-term perspective with taking into account well-being of the planet. Yeah, it's definitely a more, this broader view of the system can be a more sustainable one. And I would say a more equal one too. Okay, we've got a donut economics there, great. Meaning and relationships, humans and non-humans as greater value. Yeah, so recognizing, that's the part of this is recognizing all the other parts as having value in themselves. So I think back here, what we're doing is looking at the world in relation to ourselves, and it has value in relation to us, right? If we can't, do something or use it or whatever, then it doesn't really have much value to us. Like the way our whole economic system is set up, right? This tree has value if we can chop it down and burn it. Otherwise, it doesn't really have value to us, right? It doesn't have value in our economic system in its functioning within its broader ecosystem, independent from us. But over here in this world, we're saying, no, these things have value in and of themselves, not just in relation to me. It's actually about the whole system. We're starting to account for and value the whole system here, as opposed to here, we're really just accounting for what can this do for me? Can I get something from this? Can I own this? If not, it's no use to me. It has no value. Okay, so what else we got here? Long-term perspective, yeah, meaning and relationships, making a bigger cake together. So it's non-zero sum. So everybody can win together. Yeah, that's an interesting part. It's not just I take something and something else loses something. It's that maybe there could be synergies. Maybe we could work together in some way for the benefit of this whole system. So when we start looking at the whole system, we start to see new opportunities for working together and creating a bigger cake for everyone, right? Improving the whole system, which is ultimately going to be beneficial for all of us. In that egocentric way, we're not going to see the whole system, so we're not going to be thinking about how can we bake a bigger system, should we say, and all benefit from that. How what I do affect others around me? Yeah, so we're kind of aware of we're aware of our relationships, and we're aware of the effects of our relationships because we're considering the broader system we form part of. How is the environment? How is the environment affecting our mental and physical health? Questioning, is money serving the needs of the whole? the people working in finance are playing by the same rules that went before them. Donut economics, so we're kind of accounting for the whole system here and really asking what's the health of the whole system rather than what am I getting from this? Coexisting with nature, downsides. I mean, if you're thinking about the whole system, then you can't really have that winner and loser thing, can you? Because you're starting to account and value the whole. So it's more about coexisting, synergies, and how can we increase the value for the whole that would benefit all of us, I guess. Downside of investment in carbon emission activities, no domination by single small group of actors. Interesting. Anybody want to talk on that? Any ideas on that? It's saying this is going to be power and resources maybe are going to be more evenly distributed in this system when we're considering other people and the broader system we form part of. Money is a tool rather than a goal. Yeah, so it's performing a function, right? The finance system performs a function in our lives. We need it. It doesn't have to be a big accumulation of people storing up capital. It can actually serve a function for enabling us to live and all the other things to happen in the world. Money is a tool to help people cooperate together. Yeah. Yeah, again, get into the functional thing of this system. Reduced inequality, distribution of money. We can create change to the financial system through people power. Interesting stuff here. Win-win. Negotiation with a focus on sustainability. Who is left out behind? What needs to change? Yeah, so we're considering what's not working in the system. I guess in the more egocentric, we're trying to optimize our part of it, and we're not really thinking about the other parts, whether they're working. Whereas here, we're maybe asking questions, who's being left out, what's being left behind? Is this system as a whole functioning? Are we doing things that are win-win for the whole system, or is this going to create gains for myself, potential losses for others? Okay, so this is great.
Do you want to take one question?
Yeah,
go for it. Question? So the question is from Dan. He's asking, is the purpose of the second board, so probably the ecosystem thinking, to think about how it would be to think in systems in an ideal world, or is it to think systematically and have a view on the actual systems and its problems to really oppose ego or eco?
Well, it's the first one. It's not about thinking systematically, so you need to be aware systematic means something different from systemic. It's about what does the world look like when we take this ecosystem perspective? It's essentially the same thing as a systems thinking perspective. We're looking at the relationships in the system and ourselves in relation to everything else, the broader system and the functioning of that overall system. That's what we're trying to do here.
Okay. And I think there was just another one because it was related to finance. So I think that we had a note from participants saying on banking or secrecy as a result of ecosystem thinking.
Banking secrecy?
Banking or secrecy as a result of ecosystem thinking. So maybe if you can expand upon that. I think there's a note on the board.
Is banking secrecy a product of ecosystem thinking?
No, that's something that's been added on the board by someone. So maybe if you have anything to add, or if someone who's added it would like to expand upon it. I think Zarana has says it's just if they can hear more about it.
Trying to find it.
That's the big one. Yeah.
Hi, I'm in a very loud office, so I'm not trying not to unmute myself. But I was just very curious about what the person who wrote that and where the thinking was on that.
Probably belongs to the other side, doesn't it? Rather than the ecosystem. Here we're trying to see across the system, so we might like actually be promoting and looking for transparency and being able to see visibility so that we can actually relate. Like, we're not going to be able to relate to the whole unless we can kind of see it, and communications and transparency are going to be important here. So if societies are unhealthy, we will not be happy. Okay, community share ownership schemes, more than money. Think about how to improve everyone's financial gains, care, and empathy. People aren't ruled by money. Yeah, it's an interesting one. People, planet, and profit. So we're actually thinking about more things than profit here. So this is kind of unidimensional, isn't it? This, if we're just looking at everything in relation to ourselves, then that's about, the system is going to be a kind of monodimensional, isn't it? It's going to be about profit. But if we look at the world in this way, we're saying there are different systems, and those systems have value in and of themselves, then we might start accounting for them like people, profit, and planet, right? These are different systems, different accounting systems, and we need all of them to function instead of this profit perspective, okay? So quality over quantity, dynamics towards maximizing long-term well-being of all the actors, ecological relationships and synergies. Yeah, it could shift more, because this is a more relational way I look at the world. So when you start looking at the world in relations, you start to think more about synergies. How can we improve the whole by putting the parts together in better ways, more synergistic ways, and creating value from that, rather than just, yeah, again, what am I getting from this? Independence between all web of actions, interdependence between all web of actions and interactions. Yeah, for sure. You're going to start, when you're looking at this broader system, you're going to start to see the effects of your actions and how they play out to other parts of that system. Here, it's more kind of transactional here, because you're kind of just saying, well, what can I get from this? What can I get from that? What can I get from that? Do I own this? How does it relate to me? So you're probably not looking beyond that first level effect, right? You're saying, well, what's the value of this to me? Does it, yeah, can it create some, money for me? I'll chop it down. You're not really looking beyond that, because you're probably not going to get anything from beyond that. But here, if you think about the broader system, yeah, that spans much further than just your one interaction with this tree or this thing here. You're going to start to notice that actually that interacts with other things and interacts with other things. And of course, those feedback loops and that interdependence and so forth, that would definitely emerge from this ecosystem perspective of the world. Okay, so that was thinking about finance. Well done, guys. You created a wealth of ideas there. I think hopefully you're starting to get a sense of what we're talking about here. Both as I kind of laid it out in that broader theory and more conceptual ideas, but now we're starting to look through the lens and see in a kind of concrete way what these systems actually look like from these different perspectives. And I'm going to pass it over to Manali now, who's going to take us on to the next board. Yep.
Yeah. So similarly, how we looked at finance, we will look in reference to environment as a sector, and in terms of how, again, thinking on both sides of ecosystems and ecosystem thinking. So first, we would start with ecosystem based, more like placing ourselves, or if where we see as more of dominant in the environment, and kind of when it gets more unsustainable, and I think in days right now where it kind of also comes to be self-destructive and have an imbalanced nature. So I think if from this perspective as well, looking at an environment point of view, how would an ecosystem thinking look like?
Again, it's kind of relationship, isn't it? How are we relating to the natural environment? I think we've all seen that image, haven't we, of humans like at the top of that pyramid as a kind of ecosystem. We're looking at all those creatures in relation to us, right? Like that tree and so forth. So let's post that up. Take a couple of minutes. Okay, should we take a look at these, Anali?
I'm just going to start from the top. So we have mentioned as this connection between our actions and the impact they have on the environment. And first is resources. I think connecting them as well, just looking at the environment to how would it be beneficial for us and making it look one way, and just seeing how can we use it for our probably daily lives, or something getting out of it and not probably in a do-way thing. So seeing us apart from the nature, not seeing as, again, like this is where you're seeing yourselves as a dominant creature in the nature.
Yeah, it's kind of the linear thing, isn't it? Like we affect something, but that doesn't necessarily, we don't see the feedback, do we? It's like we can do something and that effect will just go away from us so that we can win and someone else loses. We don't see like a feedback from it. Yeah.
And I think looking also at the other side, I think it's the mindset wherein, where even if somewhere where you've not even acknowledged it, so something the note like climate change doesn't affect me, or saying I have everything I need, I'm doing my bit. So I think it's more of just not even acknowledging it, but not understanding the impacts about our actions or the need, what is there in the surrounding. Also looking at the environment, that it's something as external and not as a whole, and not being a part of it. So I think that's also the mindset that needs to be shifted. That's exactly what goes from ego to eco as well. And
interdependence, and yeah.
And I think probably taking a different perspective in terms of saying or just being satisfying in small things. Like, for example, there's unwritten as long as I have a nice home, garden, or environment, it doesn't matter. Or saying, or being more of, again, the dominant. So I'm entitled to exploit the environment. It's there to serve me and please me. So looking at things, how to extract from the environment and get more profit in return of degrading the environment as well. So wherein degradation and profit comes in, and looking at it as a service, so nature is at our service. So trying to get profits out of it and using it as resources.
This one's quite interesting. External, something can be external, we can push it away and it's not part of us, and we can keep it away. We can create boundaries, right? That's part of this too, isn't it? And things can be external. We can throw something away and it's not going to come back to us. That's kind of what we're hoping for here. Yep.
And then I think, again, Lengthwood is also a separation between environment and the self. So again, calling it an external and not making them connected. So, and again, with the perspective thinking, like people are doing more damage than I am. So probably looking at others as well, and probably how could you probably take actions or be more concerned about how things are happening, and looking what else elsewhere, or probably out of space you are. So most problems are elsewhere, abroad or out of sight, and won't affect me. So not looking at the direct effect what happens probably in your direct actions, but probably also thinking how the cycle works or how it would work in a system. So I think missing on that perspective as well.
So we've got linear and externalities. Yeah.
Then we also have polluters must pay for the damage to the environment. Again, something where putting in section or putting in group where there are some are polluters or some are non-polluters. So assuming that some probably just, if you see the direct action and calling them as polluters, but then when you're not seeing the indirect side of it, but and having that separation. So I think that perspective also comes into picture. So again, it's fine as long as I'm not affected.
Yeah, and this one's interesting, right? Humans at the top of the environmental pyramid. Interesting pyramid and hierarchy seems to pop out of this too. If we're talking about organizations, because, you know, if we have that kind of fundamental thing, someone's winning and someone's losing, well, then that pretty quickly starts creating people up and people down. And in this context, it creates us at the kind of the top of the pyramid. We're able to extract resources and win in the ecosystem, and puts us at the top of the pyramid. think that's an interesting thing. Should we stay going for the sake of time? Melanie?
Yeah, I think probably someone just put up a message, I mean, a question as a comment. If the participant has written as milk cows are also nature, to have more expansion on that. I think it's more of looking at, even if you're getting a product byproduct or a product from someone, but they're also as a part of the nature. And I think looking them at something a part of nature, not just something, someone just giving a product to us.
Yeah, well, we'll let someone post it in the chat there if they want to reply to that. Let's stay going, Kim.
Yes, I think, and then now I think we'll look at the other paradigm of environment, wherein you're thinking more in terms of how in line with how the natural world works, in terms of how it is interdependent upon its various aspects, and looking at it more holistically, and how things can be more balanced, and not the opposite of not being dominant, but how things are more interconnected.
Okay, maybe we should jump in, Manali.
Yeah. Would you summon the first part? Yes. So I think this is more of what happens to nature affects me. It is extremely important we protect nature if you want to survive. So looking at it more in a connected way and not in a dominant way, so that everyone has a role to play, and and especially looking after the environment as well after the impacts we've had until now, and looking not just what benefits you get out of it, but how it would be a better place if we protect nature. So humans taking their place in the natural systems and treating you as a part of treating nature and you both as a part of the system and not just you, and living more proactively. So again, connecting these actions and how does it imply into the nature. And another one is finding a role and place it back to the nature. So identifying how things can work and identifying how can we probably now probably give back and have more nature to have more sustainable way of living. And probably another one says that we people are just one species. I think really eradicating the dominant part of it and looking at the n number of species that really are there and not just us, and not looking at nature as a resource for consumption, and looking about trees, rivers, mountains, and animals, and everything that's part of the nature. And I think when we were talking about actions, I think we're looking at the current use within, but also understanding what happens in the future and keeping future in mind. So current use with the future in mind, and the environment at the center of all systems, because everyone's a part of it. So I think environment being the center would really make us think how you make use of the resources and also the other components of the environment.
I guess it's also, yeah, thinking over time, isn't it? And kind of how processes, it's not just a snapshot of the system and what's happening now. It's like, how are things going to change over time? As I was thinking holistically in terms of time also, as well as kind of space. Yeah. Okay.
And then I think this thought really puts things into picture. Like if I think it was above by Einstein, if bees die off, humans only have 4 years of life. So I think really understanding the impact that what would happen in the future and what happens when something's like eradicated completely out of the environment or out of the ecosystem. So treating as yourself as a part of the living system. And I think there are suggestions also how, like, this take, make, reuse, and recycle, having more of a circular way of living. So wherein you're not dominant.
Yeah, I think maybe we should move on to get to the last one, just for stay on track with time. Some great ideas there. Hopefully we're starting to see through these two lenses. I think you need to be aware of both. You need to be aware of the ecosystem before you can really be aware of the ecosystem, and trying this exercise in different dimensions as we're doing definitely helps with that. Okay.
Yes, and I think in the third canvas, we're looking in context of commerce, maybe any product or service that you probably use in your daily life, and really looking at, I think right now when you're looking at thinking from the perspective of ecosystem thinking, just how it probably benefits you, and not looking at the afterlife or before of the product, from where it comes or what's going to happen after you actually use it. So I think these implications as well.
Yeah, I guess it's thinking about the supply chain instead of just the thing I put off the shelf. It's actually thinking about its whole kind of life cycle and context. Yeah.
Should I take up here?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, let's jump in.
Yeah, I think on the top, I think something really caught my eye was the throwaway society, because it kind of really puts into picture how for the convenience and also for the ease of even the product making kind of affects the system. So when you're talking about single-use plastics or even just anything that you probably just use once and don't see the afterlife of it. And along with it, also I think beside it, the practices of retail companies aren't my problem. So while looking at things like where, let's say, tech or mobile companies design products to last only for a specific period, or maybe there are some products which are also not they're not supposed to be, or maybe can't be repaired. So I think reducing the life cycle of a product, I think so these policies of companies are also very in the ego perspective. So looking at the finance and looking how it would really affect be more of profits, I think just looking at that perspective as well. And fast fashion or following trends, and I think getting caught up in this wherein and not thinking about what impact it will have. And also just having the perspective of this, if it's a good deal for me. So just looking at or even looking at for yourself and how it would affect benefit you, not just in terms of use or finance, but not looking at how probably would the product be placed in an external point of view as well.
Yeah, okay, let's move on. I think one thing that's interesting is this, this kind of continued theme of being able to put things away or throw them away or put them somewhere else, right? Because I think it gets the idea of kind of creating boundaries and creating borders and dividing things up, and those things can be less and these things can be more. And that's kind of, we keep on seeing this thing of externalities or throw away, or that thing's more and that thing's less. So I think very much a part of this kind of worldview, this dividing and separating out borders, and then being able to push things to other places, right? Whereas over here, we're not really feeling we can do that because of the interdependence. Okay.
Yeah,
just like 1 or 2 minutes here.
Yeah, maybe 2 minutes. Yeah.
Okay, should we take a look at these to try and stay on time?
Yes, I think looking at concepts or way of using any product in terms of share economy or circular economies, I think that really not eradicating that the need of things, but seeing how can we really use efficiently to what is existing or any product which is there, and seeing the value, probably looking at it in a loop and seeing the loops of value about any product, and looking at how can only things be more sustainable in terms of when they are made, and looking at the material to what it is made. So having new eco-material culture in general to any material which is there.
Yeah, it's interesting, and we can see like how naturally a linear economy kind of follows from that ecosystem thinking, and how naturally this circular, more sustainable model follows from an ecosystem perspective. I think what's very interesting here is the kind of how easy you can trace through the direct implications of our ways of thinking.
Yeah.
Okay, so just to look at a few more here, materials as vibrant living things, sustainable design, eco-design, long-lasting materials, products as services. Yeah, but I think up here also we're getting to this kind of, loop or infinite kind of cycles in the system of feedback loops, not like finite kind of happens once, goes through a set of stages and then drops off, but actually it's cyclical, it's ongoing, it's almost kind of infinite as part of this view of the world too. Okay, great. Well done, everyone. So yeah, where do we go?
I think just one last quick thing. Probably would take just two more minutes. I think we have just just 3 questions for you guys. If y'all can, for example, did you get a good understanding of the canvas for you to be able to use it? So just a little feedback for us to also understand how the workshop's gone along the experience and what could we do more differently in the coming up workshops and sessions. So you could like grab in a note. You could either just probably rate it to put in towards yes or no, and if you want to add a comment, just add a comment and then put up the note. So it's about the format, if you got the understanding, and if you have any other ideas in front of. And on the next board, just while you do that, I'm just going to also tell upon that. So for the workshop which we did today, here are the links for the canvas and the guide. So if you want to have a blank canvas and read more, you would have more information on the guide. And there's also a link to the next workshop, next event, which is happening on 2 Loops. And you can also follow us for daily updates for recordings of events like these on LinkedIn. The recordings will be on YouTube, and you can also use the hub link for us of ours to join as a member and to have an update of all of the events and new insights overall.
Great, thank you very much, Manali. So I hope you got a good idea of what we're talking about here, both in theory, what this idea of eco and ecosystem thinking is about, how important it is actually in the context of what we're doing with systems change in terms of really, if we want those paradigm shifting major changes, we're gonna have to change our thinking, and also hopefully that you saw how our actions in the world we create really follows from our underlying paradigm and thinking. And I hope through going through those exercises, you were really able to see those systems from different perspectives and get a sense of what we're talking about here. And of course, how this canvas works in case you're wanting to use it in a workshop yourself. So we'll wrap up then. Thank you very much for joining. And as mentioned, we've got another learning session coming up in a few weeks, and another one of these tool workshops coming up in about a month from now. We'll be exploring the complexity canvas at that time, but we'll wrap up for now. Thank you all for joining. Hope you have a good evening.
Thank you much for all the time. Thanks.
Thank you, Josh. Bye-bye.